The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in. I love Kitty Pryde.
No more Magneto, guys. He's used.
Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics. I'm Noah.
Kayla.
Jared.
And today, we're revisiting the LGBTQ community.
Take that.
In comics. I mean, it's the 50th anniversary of Pride and the Stonewall Riots.
Yes.
And we wanted to end Pride Month with another episode focusing on gay couples.
Yay!
And their relationships, what we like, what we don't like, good examples of them.
Maybe weaker ones.
Yeah. So, I mean...
Plus, we have to do it because 50 years, I won't be alive in 50 more years, probably.
Probably not.
Probably
yeah.
be dead.
I
And
don't
it's,
know, medical science could improve quite a bit.
but then there might not even be gayness then. It might be like
just
everybody
everybody's gay.
does everything and it's all weird and it's like, what are you into? I like turtle people. There are turtle people now in the future because we're genetically mixed with animals. and stuff.
sexuality is a spectrum. So, I mean,
Yeah.
whatever. Evolve to a higher human and that's what happens.
That
then
might happen.
fucking great.
Hopefully
Cool.
so.
I will be accepting of it. But no, I mean, we wanted to, sadly, I guess, start this episode with... I don't even know how to start this part, just because it feels so trivial and so kind
Can
of...
I start it?
Yeah, go ahead.
There are dicks on the internet.
Yeah, I mean...
Especially on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Why?
is really
don't
funny
know.
too. I mean, I would expect it from Twitter, but I guess Facebook is now the new Twitter with stuff like that. I mean, so we put out our first history of LGBTQ in comics or whatever, which was pretty much just strictly the history of that in comics.
Which we liked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of people did too. I mean, especially people of the LGBTQ community that found the episode from that and was like, this is great or whatever. I love that. That's fantastic. And then, of course, we had a lot of people that just purposely went on a post like that to say negative or hurtful things. I mean, I think this goes without saying that it's not for you. Like, I don't care that you don't like it. I mean... It's very near and dear to us on this podcast because 2 of us are part of that community. And I don't...
3 if you count allies.
I don't want to add another letter to that. Like, I'm already struggling, like, saying it now. I mean, I don't know. I just don't be a fucking dick.
Well, there's a paradox of us even talking about it in this way, which is that most people who said crappy things in the comments didn't listen to the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they just saw a thing in their newsfeed. And, you know, we had the episode go out and shared a lot on Facebook. And so people saw it that we weren't targeting. So, like, Trump supporters in Paducah, Kentucky saw it.
Yeah,
And people in
that's a real
Paducah-
person.
Yeah.
So, fuck you.
Yeah, people in Paducah aren't into it. And I do, not to defend them at all, but I will say this. There is this thing on the internet where especially older people who are not savvy don't necessarily get how this stuff is communicated. I'm not talking about me. I mean, older than me.
That's what I'm saying.
I know, yeah. But it used to be, I feel like, advertisements and this kind of thing about, like, part of the world that you didn't want to be exposed to, you could really avoid. You know,
I mean,
it's
you
like
could keep scrolling.
It wasn't it wasn't in your town. I mean, before scrolling. I mean, like you could not turn on the channel or you could turn on TV off. But now, content these people feel invaded by it, and they feel like the homophobes of the world, basically. You know, and it's like I get that they want their part of Mayberry to be untouched and be the same, but the world changes, and I'm sorry, we can't pretend we don't exist.
Also, sorry that you finally feel what it feels like to be a homosexual in a world where everything's marketed towards straight people.
No,
I mean, you don't see me complaining about, now, but you didn't see me like going purposely on ads and saying that. I mean, just whatever. I mean,
and our stuff wasn't even like, I know we have to get off this topic, but like our stuff wasn't even like straight people suck or we're forever victims or whatever. It was just about like, hey, this is the history of gay people in comics. That was basically it. Sorry, queer people, not just gay people.
That was
queer people in comics.
literally it.
Yeah. and people were like, how can you even mention the fact that you are existent in those? It's like, well, I don't, It's not like I went to their church and was like, gay people are real, and then left. You know?
I just think the most obnoxious part is having to go through the comments for people that are excited to listen to the episode for whatever reason, and then having to delete them, block them. Because, I mean, if you're, like, super excited about something, regardless of what it is, it sucks to have to go on there and see all these people being so negative, especially when it's as personal as attacking your existence.
Yeah. But you're right, because we love talking to people that are nice in the comments. We love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we did this podcast and created the platforms that we have on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the two that we have. We have a Facebook group as well that's actually really fun to be in.
Cuz Comics.
Yeah, Cuz Comics. But no, I mean, we created this to have a fun, safe, all those cliche things that you could possibly say to create a nice environment for people that just like the same thing. I mean, we will argue with people on the things, but it's...
And each other.
Yeah, and each other. Like, we're arguing on our own podcast things with each other on there. I mean, we wanted to create an environment for people to just experience and talk about and share stuff that they love, which is comics. I mean, and to go on to something like Caleb was saying, I mean, that's what I remember I was telling these guys, because I was like kind of policing the comments in a way. Like as soon as somebody would put something negative, I'd like ban and delete, only because I was
fined several times.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't want somebody clicking on the comments and like being excited, like, oh, somebody made something about, something I'm really interested in and is personally like good for me. And then just seeing a bunch of hate on there. It's like, I'm not, I'm taking that shit.
I'm not leaving that up.
Yeah. So we thought we'd just kind of address that. And it kind of helped many inspire this episode.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't going to never not do another episode with this. And I think ending Pride Month with, talking about the goodness of LGBTQ people in comics and the relationships they have is a great way to end it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. On that note.
So we're doing relationships.
Yes.
And I think it's worth mentioning, like, why do relationships? And I think it's because that, now I want to be clear, the LGBTQ plus spectrum is not exclusively defined by people who you love. Some of it's about gender and identity and stuff like that. Absolutely welcome. But a lot of the sort of trailblazing sort of stuff in comic books has been about these sort of relationships. And in a lot of ways, I think there's something really fucked up about homophobia where you don't like people for the people they love.
Yeah.
Like you're angry about the affection that they have. And last thing I'll say on that is, when you talk about straight people, you talk about that whole range of romance and relationships and sitting around and watching TV and having a joint checking account and sex. When you talk about gay, you just talk about sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's got to change, and it is slowly. And so we thought it would be really cool to like pick out our favorite like LGBT couples and talk about them. Before we get there, we'll just talk about the issue kind of generally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's getting better. I think that they're really representing couples. I think the best way to represent an LGBTQ couple in comics is to not announce that they are an LGBTQ couple in comics. Like I don't
Break
remember
that down a little bit.
I don't remember a time when, I mean, they're like the straight couple of Lois and Clark or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or like they're having to come out to say that they're straight, or like, do the whole fucking thing of like showing them like being bullied because they're with the person they're with. It's like, I think that there's a time and place for that kind of story.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't think it's acceptable or should be done in every single time that an LGBTQ person is in a comic. And especially when they're in a relationship, because I can't remember actually any character like that didn't have that moment of somebody kind of bullying them or harassing them in the comic. So I just, That's something that I feel like just needs to kind of be walked back a bit. Just act like they're normal people, because they are.
I mean, right, complex characters and complex relationships will follow. So I completely understand.
Yes. So to add to that, because I think that's very true. In some sense, there's a history to this. We talked about that in our other episode. Listen to our other episode. But about the fact that, like, look, we're past the need to only focus on those kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. It's like, of course, you're welcome if you're a writer to do a coming out story. But we're past I'm a bit bored of coming out stories. Now, I don't mean totally or completely, but...
Or you don't understand the significance of it.
Exactly. This is not that different than, hey, we don't need all superhero movies to be origin movies anymore.
Yeah.
They're great. We needed to do that, but not after a while, it's like, look, there's more to this sort of like...
Stop going back to the beginning.
Absolutely. And it feels very similar with Batman.
Yeah, I could tell that you could tell that I was kind of seething.
And you made the point about basically gay bashing or prosecution of queer people generally. Yeah, I mean, I want to see that in the pages. I want that dealt with, but that's not our only story.
Right. And that's what I mean. I think to progress and to have people not necessarily like forcing to accept it or like just to have a good story, I don't think that you always need to show the bad side of that community or those people or the terrible things that happen to them. I mean, I personally just don't want to see it because it does upset me.
We're not just victims.
Exactly.
Unless that helps us win a Facebook argument. And in that case, we're victims.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure because a lot of different groups are underrepresented in comics. Because I know we were talking about it before.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That healthy relationships, healthy characters... there's a lot of pressure on like any singular queer character that like to be good.
Yeah.
And I feel like the straight characters don't have that pressure, obviously, because there's a slew of them. So you can have a variety of different characters with different levels of complexity. And I feel like the next step would be obviously not just the more representation, but to I don't know, not...
There's tension. I mean, I think it's good that you mentioned this because, like, you talk about representation in comics, or in media generally, but let's stick to comics. Talk about representation, you're talking about what's good representation.
Yeah.
And some of that means good representation, literally, like, I want to see healthy examples. So a lot of people don't know this, but in the 50s and 60s, gay people were more or less known about in a social sense, especially in the cities, but they were associated with, like, criminality and disease and all this kind of stuff. So it's like... I'm glad that representations we have of gay people and queer people generally are not just negative.
Yeah.
But we're also at a point now, maybe in our acceptance, where we should be able to have negative examples.
Yeah.
And still have a robust enough social and cultural presence that we're not at such risk. Like if you have a gay guy that's an asshole, that's like, oh, it's going to hurt the community. We can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is a tension.
Yeah. I think that extreme, I think prior it might have been a bad thing to do like a bad guy that was homosexual or whatever because it's like see they're all bad or whatever. I think now we're definitely in the point where it's like they can be gay and also bad and it's like that's fine.
We're like we can be evil.
I completely agree. That's definitely the next step. It's more representation than just more complexity. I as a writer I do feel that like if you don't have a lot of representation in your story there is that pressure. You can't have the one singular black character be this way if
especially a stereotype. I mean,
exactly. So just it has to be super conscious of it going forward.
But like if you have one gay character and it's like he's a fashion designer / prostitute, it's like that's kind of like
yikes.
Back up. Don't do that.
I feel like a solution to this would be to have more queer writers, creators, artists.
Well, and that's the funny thing too, because most of at least my favorite or considered the best representation of LGBTQ people in comics, the people that wrote those stories are part of the LGBTQ community or queer people or whatever. It's like, I mean, you can't expect somebody that has no experience living that way or at least anything like that to write about that. I mean, they could have like they've had family members or whatever, but if they've had no experience, it feels a little weird.
And well, that's a good segue into kind of back into the topic because we've been talking about kind of generally about queer representation for the moment, but like about queer relationships. If you haven't had a queer relationship, this is queer as hell. It makes it difficult because, and I think we should talk about this for a second. In comic books, you have all of the same problems of writing relationships, because relationships are hard to write.
Yeah.
Hard to make realistic, hard to figure out what's interesting. But also, queer relationships of the various stripes are a bit different than straight relationships for any number of reasons. And so I'll give the comic book writers who have struggled with this at least the credit that I recognize it is not the easiest thing to realistically depict.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there might be some hesitation with it. I mean, if I was in a writer's position and I was writing about something that I wasn't personally experienced or like I wasn't too familiar with, and it's like, well, I have to write this or whatever because of whatever pressure or whatever, I would definitely be hesitant to do that. And I've seen examples in comics as I've read. I'm like, this is a little, they kind of like tiptoed around it. It's like, I kind of wanted to mention this, but I'm not too sure. And then they kind of like went away from it. They're like, okay, bye.
Yeah. Half a panel.
Yeah. It's like, wait, no, where'd they go?
Well, so let's give kind of a name to it or some specifics here. I think one thing that especially up until recently was an issue about, okay, once you have gay couples in comics, how can they be affectionate?
Yes.
Well, no, I agree. But what I mean,
yes, Jared.
No, I didn't know I was a bigot until just now. No, but there's this issue about like, so one, you can overdo it.
Yes.
You can over-sexualize gay people and gay couples, where it's like anytime two gay people are in a room and they're dating, it's like they have to be not just like kissing, but they have to be like holding hands, like rubbing each other to prove like,
or like wearing something very scandalous.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too upset at that as long as it goes with the character. I mean, I know that kind of sounds weird.
I agree to a certain extent where you're coming from. It's like, well, if they're kind of like more open about sex or
like
affection.
Starfire, she's very like she
oh my God.
Acknowledges that she's very sexual.
The gay people from her planet, if they come down here, the people are gonna be like, they're whores. It's like, no, that's just their planet.
But I mean, that's what like it makes sense.
The point that Jared had made earlier, though, that gay relationships are kind of over-sexualized is fair too. And again, I just go back to the fact, if you just are a good writer and write good complex characters, the good complex relationships will follow, and that's kind of all you need.
Yeah,
it's true.
I agree. Yeah, and I do think it's either one or the other. It's either that, sexual relationships or sexuality within those communities are either really underrepresented or they're scared to do it, or it's a little too far, depending on what the story is, and especially what character you're reading. If they just go like way into like the sexuality, it's like, whoa, this is like...
But this tension that exists for the writer exists in a political way, because there's this issue. They're also trying to sell comics to middle America.
Yeah.
And I think there's this thing that a writer goes through where they're like, okay, well, I want to write what's true, but I also don't want to like, not even alienate people. I don't want this to distract from the story when there's a bunch of people uncomfortable. And I only bring this up because that's the lives that we lead as gay couples. Because the fact is that, if, I'm from Georgia. And when I go,
no.
I know, and it is hell. No, I love Georgia. But if you're in a relatively rural part of it, even now, I mean, the whole world's the whole country's more progressive when it comes to gay people. But we have to worry about if I'm affectionate. I don't want to be dramatic, like they're going to beat us up, because I think that happens way less than it used to. It's more like, am I just going to make all the people in this Walmart uncomfortable?
Yeah, I mean, there is that thing. Like, personally, like, I mean, I've been in a restaurant or in a public space and it's like, oh, I want to hold my partner's hand, or like, I don't like ever do that in public. And it's not necessarily because I'm fearful, but it's more of out of respect, I guess, for other people.
Well,
like,
it's so sad that you guys have to feel that way.
Yeah. And it's especially with kids around. Like, I think I was talking to Jared about this, and like, it's weird that like, I don't want to expose kids to things that their parents don't want to teach them, I guess, if that makes sense. So like, I don't know. I just think like, it's one or the other. Like, it's going in the right direction, like you were saying. Like, people are definitely more progressive. Yeah. But then I think us as the LGBTQ community, it's hard to say that like we need to be less fearful and just more like open with it. But that also has consequences. So
yeah, and so as we get more power and more representation, there's this question about like, okay, how do we want to integrate? And it's easy to have this attitude, and appropriate a lot of times, by the way, to be like, hey, if they don't like it, they can go fuck themselves. So that's appropriate sometimes, but other times people don't mean to be uncomfortable. Yeah. And it's like, I don't want to be in a Payless shoes and be like, hey, I'm holding my boyfriend's hand. you Bible thumping hooker or whatever. I don't want to make that the experience.
No, but I think that's why, like, the representation in comics, like the couples in comics, are a good thing, because it has shown the good side of all of that. It does show that it's normal. It's very accepting, even among the Avengers, which is a good thing to see. It's like, okay, who's going to be a bigot?
Yeah, those heroes that you love so much, they're fine. Okay.
Yeah, aren't they your role models?
Yeah.
Be like them.
Exactly. I feel like there's kind of the opposite side too, that when two people of the same gender have a really complex relationship in comics, it's easy to brush aside. It's like, wow, look at those gal pals. They're such best friends.
Yeah.
I particularly ran into it when doing research for my couple. There was this article that was just like, look how close their friendship is. And I was just like, they've been married in alternate universes. They've made out several times. They're girlfriends. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm not going to mention your couple until you say it or whatever. But DC posted something about them recently during Pride Month and was like, oh, when your best friend doesn't listen to you. And I was like, really? I retweeted it on Twitter. I was like, DC, it's Pride Month, and you still can't acknowledge that they're in a relationship? I'm like, y'all wrote it. You guys made them gay, so
But I feel like that happens a lot with characters of the same gender that have such a complex relationship. It's easy to brush aside as like, they're so close, they're best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it also sort of desexualizes the whole thing, which is not, like, again, it's like, I don't want to infuse it with sexuality all the time, but that's involved. And there's sort of a way, it's like, okay, a romantic relationship is not just extra friendly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, if you really are friends with somebody, all of a
like
sudden,
you have more dinners with them than like your other friends.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is that or another thing to talk about is that there is, like, relationships are different to talk about, because sometimes there's just strife in relationships. And it kind of does bother me because, like, now in this age of acceptance, which is positive, there's an over kind of idealization of gay relationships as more harmonious, not more harmonious. That's not a word, but should be more harmonious than straight relationships on the basis that the genders are the same.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So I do stand-up comedy, and I'll be at an open mic, and I'll listen to, there's a real common hackney premise that straight guys will do. And it's beautiful because they're trying to be accepting, but they'll say things like, man, I bet, I'd be great if it wasn't for the sex part. Just be in a relationship with another dude. That'd be so good. It's like, yeah, because, you know, gay guys aren't dramatic or anything. You're right. No, it's very laid back.
And
like, what are you talking about?
That is funny because there's just some weird thing of like, oh, I would love to be in a relationship with a dude if it wasn't for the sex part. It's like, it's just like every other relationship.
Exactly.
What are you talking? Like, they still won't do the dishes. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, exactly. You
but
have
I think a thing that I've seen more in comics that I really like, as far as couples go, is that the different types of relationship. So we've crossed the barrier of putting gayness into comics, and now they're actually doing the
Gay-city.
they're doing the different types of relationships, not in just the gay community or the straight community, but it's like, you know, the polyamorous people, you know, the people that are in open relationships and stuff like that. And I think that's really interesting.
The polyamorous people, or also known as the people that are so much better than us. They're good at their so it's amazing.
Free love.
I mean, good for y'all.
Yeah, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah. No, it's true. I also think it's worth mentioning, I think it's kind of implied by what we've been talking about. I like that at a political level. I mean, and again, people who are a bit homophobic listen to this. I'm not trying to insult you.
I don't think they've made it this far.
I know.
Oh, yeah, they definitely turned this episode off minutes and minutes ago.
But I'm just really glad that the companies have taken the pro-gay political stance. They have made missteps. I think the thing you mentioned with the DC sort of being like, they're such buddies.
Well, so I think there's a weird
genitally
thing.
Speaking, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you see that a lot more when they're doing the marketing. When I think with comics, it's a little odd, only because comics are still kind of considered, or at least with some people that don't know better, for kids.
Yeah.
So if they see that, then I don't know. Like, I don't know the whole like logistics behind it, but I do know it's like more with their marketing. Because the issue when we talked on the last episode, where Harley Quinn number 25,
yeah,
when their first kiss, the cover of that of like the trade that it's in isn't of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's of Harley with bodies in the shape of 25. So it's like, even though that was a huge pivotal moment for that character and such a great moment in comic book history, it's like that still wasn't.
It almost was like a sneaky thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you could have somehow made the 25 on the cover because of the 25th anniversary of Harley Quinn, but with that, I don't know.
Well, if only it was an art form that was known for communicating things visually without saying them. If only that.
Only.
I mean, we do have to kind of deal with that, and we got to get past it, because the fact is that, I'm sorry, it's just like being gay, being in a queer relationship is not purely sexual.
No.
And any more than it's like, well, I don't want my kids being exposed to that. It's like, okay, well, there's a couple of 2 80-year-olds, and I don't want to be exposed to the thought of them fucking, but I have to recognize they love each other and they're companions.
I mean, if you don't want to expose them to it, just read what you're giving your kids to.
Yeah.
Like what you're giving your kids stuff. I mean, just be a proactive adult, I guess, and stop whining about it. You don't have to re-give it to them.
Heck
Whatever.
yeah.
Right when I pressed record.
Yeah. No, is it recording now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hell
then
yeah.
I want to say Noah's a fucking dick, okay? He's going to edit it out, but now that we're back, I wanted to be able to say that.
Well, you will say it, because the thing is that he won't edit it out. It's going to be like at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Or like a teaser.
One of those before or after things.
Yeah.
Right on the nose. All right, so we're going to get into our couples that we picked that we like in the LGBTQ community in comic books. And I believe Kayla's kicking it off.
Wait, I am?
Right?
No.
Jared.
Yes.
Whatever.
I'm
I know
going
I'm
back.
not.
I'm Boy Kayla. Anyway. Yeah, so we all picked couples, and I picked, I think you probably would predict this. I know you said it, but I'm not double saying it. Here's the thing. You probably know that I picked Wiccan and Hulkling in a world where I am a 14-year-old boy, but I'm not. So
Oh my God.
This is not that world, so I did a better couple. No. I did Shatterstar and Richter. Yay! We were like, yay! And
Everybody's
a lot of
like,
the listeners, who?
Exactly. We'll educate them.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to tell you about both of them kind of independently. First, I should say a little something about the X universe, because this is kind of how it works in the X universe. It's a big enough world now that there's always, at any given time, it's sort of like Batman stuff, or like there's always...
There's like 7 ongoing issues in the same universe going on.
Yeah, or just generally there's a bunch of unused characters, so there's always these like titles, in this case like X Factor and the New Mutants and X Force, that's sort of like, just that's outside orbit of X-Men stuff. And my two characters, Shatterstar and Richter, both sort of have a history like that. Now, do you want to hear the normal guy or the weird guy first?
Let's start with normal and get freaky later.
Normal it is. Excellent. So Richter, his name is Julio Esteban Richter, which he's a Mexican. I'll explain. His last name is Richter, spelled Richter. So here's people in Texas will appreciate this eventually. But so he's a Mexican immigrant and the son of a arms dealer. This happens in the 70s, so it's but his last name's Richter. It's his German name, and people are like, how can he be both a Mexican and because German people settled this whole area. It's why there's so many German names in Texas and stuff like that, like Schlitterbahn and what's that shitty beer?
Fredericksburg. Are you going to say Shiner?
Oh yeah, it's
Shiner's
an
not
awful beer.
shitty.
Anyway, okay. But anyway, so Richter is a mutant with the ability to generate seismic energy. Vibrations, generally, he can produce them, absorb them.
Like the Richter scale?
Absolutely, that's where it comes from. Yay!
Ding, ding.
And he can create earthquakes. And it's kind of cool. It focuses more on the vibrational aspect and not the earth manipulation aspect. He can create earthquakes and stuff like that.
So he's not an earthbender.
He's not really an earthbender. There's, he can kind of like crumble like cliffs and stuff like that, but unlike Avalanche or like Terra or something like that. So he doesn't have that ability. But he's super cool. And anyway, so he's one of those characters that, like the Robins, kind of grew up in the X-Men comics. And the reason I say that, his first appearance was in X Factor. I can't remember the issue, but more important, he was a young mutant that discovered his ability to like shake the earth or whatever. And he was captured by this group called The Right, led by Cameron Hodge, which is like, they were like a evil human, we hate mutants kind of group or whatever. So he's X Factor rescues them because like the bad guys are gonna use him to like destroy San Francisco with his like.
It's always San Fran.
Yeah.
It's easy to make it fall off the continent.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so he's sort of had a position in these sort of other X teams or whatever. The New Mutants for a while, and then later on he was in X-Force. He was with K in the 90s, which is where he met Shatterstar. Anyway, and then later on he actually was in a great book by Peter David, X Factor. It was one of the later instantiations where they were like a private investigating firm in the wake of M-Day, which is when everybody lost their powers. And Richter lost his powers too. And then when Scarlet Witch gave them all back, he came back. Or whatever.
Thanks, Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, she's a real butthole. Anyway. But so that's Richter, essentially a kind of very standard kind of mutant who has the ability. Now, you're like, wait, isn't that a DC character named Vibe? I don't know why there are two Hispanic characters who both have, I think it's like in movies, like, where they'll, for some reason, two movies like Dante's Peak and Volcano will come out at the same time, like Deep Impact and Armageddon.
I think they've changed vibe a little bit, but yeah, that's
well, same way here. He's pretty developed now in a certain way, but yeah, absolutely. Now Shatterstar,
Time to get freaky.
Yes, well,
so weird.
So I hope the Mojoverse or Mojo World means something to you guys. If not, I'm going to try to briefly explain it. It is kind of it's one of the wackiest but coolest X-Men things ever, which is basically the idea of this other dimension run by this slovenly, gross dictator named Mojo. And the whole world is basically just a reality television show.
I love it.
It's great. And most of their entertainment, at least that we're interested in, are these sort of like characters specifically bred for gladiatorial combat.
Oh, man.
Exactly.
Marvel loves to do that.
They're big into it.
Gladiators.
Yeah. So Mojo runs the whole joint, and it's also a kind of like Asgard in the movies thing where it's both science and magical. Like Mojo's chief like apprentice or assistant is like this mage named Spiral, who is also badass. We have no time. Anyway, okay. So Shatterstar, along with Longshot and a few other characters, are some of the chief rebels against Mojo. That's all you really need to know. We can we'll deep dive that stuff later. Anyway, so Shatterstar is a genetically modified character, and this was really popular in the 90s, where they would have really badass mutant characters but they had guns and swords and had all this kind of stuff and physical stuff, and then they had another mutant power, but it was way less important. Like it was just like, oh, he's like he has swords and he shoots people. Also, he can communicate with daffodils, but that has his real mutant power. So Shatterstar's like that. He has the ability to create shockwaves, seismic shockwaves, similar to Richter.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
He sort of creates vibrational energy blasts, but he can only do it through a metal channel. Like he can't do it through air or touch the ground like Richter. He has to have like a sword or whatever, which was
weird.
It's also popular in the 90s.
Yeah, it's so weird that that's the medium.
Yeah,
like he needs like a tuning fork.
Yeah,
well, there's some sense to it, which is that like his powers are kind of weak and undeveloped, so he has to have like
something
like,
to channel it.
Yeah, it's like sound and vibration communicate through metal pretty easy or something like that.
Like a tuning fork.
Yeah, but he doesn't like it's not a fork; it's a sword. It's different. Though his sword, he does have two. It's a double sword, so it's kind of like a fork. You have a good point.
That's what I was getting at. Okay, but that's
fine. So anyway, he comes to Earth to try to get the X-Men's help. Point being, now they're both in X-Force, and that's where they meet in the 90s. And this is like a lot of the gay history that we have talked about, where Jeff Loeb happened to be the writer in this case. They do a kind of like, they're maybe gay. Kind of like sort
they
of
flirt a little bit.
Before they can actually come out and say they're gay. In the 90s, after Rob Liefeld maybe implies it, it's hard to tell. So some of their sexuality, this is weird, Shatterstar is rooted in the fact that he's this genetically altered gladiatorial sort of thing that's essentially asexual. He has a wife named Windsong. And they're like, oh, he's got a wife. That's crazy. He's like, oh, I've never met her, because they're just genetically paired up. So sex never comes into the equation. So when he comes to Earth, a lot of the idea is like, oh, he has to think about sex in a kind of romantic sense for the first time. So it turns out Shatterstar is pansexual. It's kind of where he ends up.
Yeah,
which is he can just love anybody, I guess, or whatever. So the relationship is kind of insinuated early on before it's common for characters to sort of be out of the closet. Eventually, in the pages of X Factor, Peter David's X Factor, they share the first openly gay kiss. Yay! in a mainstream comic book. You have to qualify it or whatever. But it's sort of unclear as to like how long Shatterstar has been implied to be gay. It's in some sense like the way that people have gone back and looked for clues. It definitely seems like this was a story that was going to take place. Even like it seems like the way the story was going to go, and it sort of like got cut off before they could get there, was that Shatterstar was going to come on to Richter, but then Richter was going to be like, "Can't do that, bro. I'm not into that." Like they were going to play on the fact that Shatterstar didn't understand sexuality.
Yeah.
There was a famous scene, and I hate, you know how I love Deadpool, but the first time they fight, Deadpool like says like 4 homophobic things to him. He actually calls him Liberace. At one point. This is when Deadpool was a bad guy, so they were a little bit more comfortable making him quasi homophobic. Oh my
god!
Yeah. So it's a weird
That's
early
ironic
history.
coming from Deadpool.
No, I know. Who later? Well, but he's repressing, so it makes a lot of sense at that time. But anyway, so again, they have a kind of inchoate relationship that isn't made real until the X Factor days. Now, I should be clear about both of their sexuality, both Richter and Shatterstar. They're both bi or pan, depending on how you feel about it, you know? Or like, again, we're trying to piece this together from. They haven't said like I'm a pansexual or something like that. But yeah, so the reason I like this couple specifically is I mentioned at the top of like the segment that Hulkling and Wiccan are these two characters that they're sort of the only two gay male couples at the time at Marvel, and where Wiccan and Hulkling have this perfect little like high school Dawson's Creek kind of gay relationship. It's very Degrassi, whatever.
That's cute,
it's cute.
And they're teenagers.
Of course, it's cute. And I think it would be too heavy to make that already fraught situation even worse by making it,
That's true.
But in this case, Richter and Shatterstar actually develop a kind of, if not difficult, or if not dysfunctional, at least difficult relationship. So one, they're both bi, which doesn't have to be inherently bad. But the problem is there's Wolfsbane, and they have like a love triangle with them where she's asleep. This floozy, anyway.
She died.
No, she's wonderful. I love her. But Wolfsbane is if you don't know, a shape-shifting werewolf mutant from Scotland named Rain Sinclair.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just like the more you
put it that way.
Yeah, you keep adding, I'm like, ridiculous. More ridiculous.
And she's a Libra. Anyway. So bad. But she has an off and on again relationship with Richter. And it exists in the face of the fact that Shatterstar is not able to fully understand that he can't sleep with other people.
Yeah.
Where they have wonderful.
To be fair, he's from another universe.
And he kind of wants it both ways because Richter's like, "Are you sleeping with this other lady?" And again, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But and Shatterstar's like, "You can't do that. I thought you could do that." And he's like, "I think you can't." And he's like, "Well, I still want to be with you mainly, but it's like I can't have sex with other people if you're not in my life because it won't be as good." But here's the thing: this is pretty complicated stuff.
Yeah,
and it's happening in the pages of a Marvel comic. Yeah, I as a comic fan and a queer person, I was like seriously impressed with the sophistication of, and I think Peter David. Probably secretly gay, as you know. No, not necessarily. But anyway, so that series ended in the mid 2000s or whatever, and since then they've had a kind of on again, off again relationship, and I've always been a fan of their very like realistic Ross and Rachel kind of relationship
with adding Chandler into it.
Yeah, exactly. Gross. I
think that's really interesting. I mean, in the beginning of the episode, we had talked about how they were adding more representation with different types of couples and like their dynamics and stuff. So to add a werewolf into like a relationship of all things, and also her being a female with two people that are also bisexual or pansexual.
Well, I feel like bisexual men are also just super underrepresented in all media platforms. So that's fascinating anyway. And the on again, off again aspect kind of gives you something to root for. You're like, oh my god, they finally figured it out. No,
will they? Won't they?
They did I think they did a Danish study on bisexual men, and it was really bad PR for the bi community.
Oh no.
It was a bit misunderstood because what they found was there's a bunch of bi men that basically didn't respond sexually to heterosexual pornography. So they identified as bi, but when it came to how they responded, and this fit in with an already pre-existing stereotype, which is all bi guys are really just gay guys that don't want to be gay.
Yeah.
But it really gave a lot of anti-bi people a lot of crappy talking points. Yikes. And so we're getting to a point now where there's been enough acceptance. Hey, bi people, especially men, are a thing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think it's really good to have a kind of healthy, existent relationship in comics that is just
represented with two bi men.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's true. I mean, even bi women are more represented in the thing, and it's more socially accepted, even with the people that are homophobes.
Yeah.
Which it's a whole other conversation.
Be talking about that.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation, and it's bullshit. But yeah, I mean, I like that. I'm not too fond of these characters. I like Richter a lot over Shatterstar. I don't know. Shatterstar kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes. But I like their I like their relationship, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
Just on that real quick, because I think one, he's been represented artistically very badly because he was created by Roberts. Mr. Robert Q. Liefeld.
That's it.
Just Robert.
And look, that's divisive. I think some people actually like Rob Liefeld's art, so I don't want to dog him too much. I'm not as big a fan. But also, he had this problem of overpowerousness, but not the OP thing, just too many random powers. So they had that ability, like I mentioned, where he can channel stuff. But I'm energy through metal objects like his swords. I'm kind of okay with that. But then recently they gave him the ability to teleport. But it was very bizarre about how he could do it.
He's just Nightcrawler from Mojo.
No, it was worse. It was sort of like he could create these portals that were in the shape of an X. So good X branding, I guess. But it was like, I can only do it when I have an anchor, and it's got to be a Tuesday evening, and it has to be misting. It's got to be misting. But so anyway,
calm down.
Exactly. So I get the resistance because there's a bit confusion in the concept. But either way, he looks cool as shit.
And their relationship is super interesting.
Yeah. And he's got this cool star patch on his eye. I don't know why. But yeah, great couple. I hope we see more of them in the future. There you go.
And hopefully they'll be on again.
Yeah.
Right. All right. On to one of my favorite characters in comics.
What are you doing?
Wait, you're doing Shatterstar as well?
I literally just said I don't like him. I mean, that's a weird thing to say. I don't care for him.
That's better.
He is ugly. That's what I mean.
So, Midnight and Apollo.
Whoa, what? You're talking about who now?
It's kind of weird not to mention them.
No, yeah, for sure.
Only if we're talking about specifically LGBTQ couples, they're kind of the top, at least for me, and as far as popularity and being kind of branded that way.
What they've gone through together and what they are to each other. Hell yeah. I'm serious about that, Rec. Please send it my way.
So they were first introduced in Wildstorm Comics, a book called Stormwatch, in Volume 2, Number 4, in 1998. Wildstorm is now a part of the DC universe. Before it wasn't, and now it is actually part of the continuity. They were a result of a genetic manipulation of the sinister Weatherman, a.k.a. Henry Bendix, who wiped out all memory of their past lives. So prior to meeting Henry, they don't remember anything. So no childhood, nothing where they came from. After they broke free from them, they went underground for several years. Midnight and Apollo were finally taken under the wing of Jason King. He's pretty much the new Weatherman, with what Bendix was, and then he just kind of took his place. So they gave them, it's really weird since they don't remember who they are. They only know each other by their code names. They were given aliases, but I think so far that's been retconned. But just so you know, Lucas Trent is Midnighter, which he's like, I kind of like that, but I'm not going to use it. Just call me Midnighter.
Yeah.
And then Apollo is Andrew Pulaski. So that's a fun little tidbit.
Yeah.
That's their real names, but nobody calls them that. Like,
And
ever.
it may have been retconned.
Yeah, ever. So during the years on the
They
run,
need it like if they go to the bank, though.
Yeah.
they don't need to go to the bank.
Well,
They have an apartment. They have bills.
Shut up.
They got to say, it makes sense.
So during the years on the run, they had become lovers. So you don't really see this in the comics because when it picks up, they've already been in a relationship for about 5 years.
so they've been in like an established relationship
Yes.
when we see
Yeah.
them.
So they're already there.
Mhm.
Like there's no like, will they, won't they? Like there was kind of some, I think they were a little nervous in the beginning a little bit. And then they just went full right into it. They're like, yeah, they've been in a relationship. They're perfectly fine. So I think in number 8, so from issue number 4 to number 8, it was officially like, we're gay type thing. So that's when they actually announced it. When the other Stormwatch members were killed, the story of a Midnighter Apollo continued an other Wildstorm comic called The Authority, which I know Jared loves the
one of my
story.
favorite
Isn't
comics of
Warren
all time.
Ellis involved?
Yes, he's the one that made this.
Warren Ellis
Yeah.
wrote
Yeah.
it.
No, I was going to say, I trust him. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is why I'm like, the quality
That's
must be
amazing.
really great.
Yeah, I mean, The Authority alone, it's both of these stories are so well done, and it's not just like a copy of the Justice League. Like there's some like analog type stuff going on,
Sure.
like especially with Midnight and
really?
Apollo,
Yeah.
like explicitly made to resemble Batman and Superman. But
Who have such a unexplored sexual tension anyway.
yeah, so I love The Authority. You definitely pick it up, especially if you want something.
Oh, I was just going to say, The Authority, if you don't have a sense of it, is like the Justice League if they were political.
Yes,
The argument being like, well, why doesn't the Justice League, do something about like famine or despotic regimes?
yeah.
Interesting.
This group does.
And then one of the biggest things that happened in Authority was in number 29 in 2002, when after they got married, they adopted a kid,
Aw.
which is the first fully gay, not was straight, then turned gay. Alan Scott already had kids.
Yeah.
Doesn't count. But Midnight and Apollo adopted a kid, which was Jenny Quantum, which is she a kid though? Like, she was the spirit of the 30th century or 20th century that had died and then came back in the form of a kid.
She was an adult woman, died and came back
Or
as
some
a child.
entity-like thing.
Yeah, Jenny Sparks was the spirit of the 20th century, and it's that kind of like thing that Ellis and Moore have a tendency to do, which is like make these Jungian archetype-y kind of things. So she was this character that was symbolized by electricity. She had like, think Thor, Storm, that kind of stuff. Very powerful. And then she died killing God.
Oh.
And then she was reincarnated to be the spirit of the 21st century. So Jenny Quantum, who had, as a baby, crazy ass powerful stuff.
That's actually kind of cool now.
It's
that
very cool.
And they're like the best couple to take care of this overpowered kind of like Franklin Richards type character.
Yeah.
Because you have Apollo, which is super powerful Superman or whatever.
Yeah.
Essentially think of that. And then you have Midnighter. And he can just already know what's going to happen with her. So it's perfectly fine. But yeah, so that's a really cool moment in comics, not only for the LGBTQ community, but I mean, it's just showing that they could have given this kid to anybody. They could have given it to King, the weatherman or whatever that was running, Stormwatch, but they didn't. They gave it to the homosexual couple. And I always thought that was a really interesting thing that they did, or a really cool thing that they did.
Oh, by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't know these characters at all, just think gay Batman and gay Superman.
Yes.
That'll help
I'm going to
you
get into
visualize.
that.
Okay, yeah.
So Apollo is essentially an alternate take on Superman. Instead of being an alien himself, he is actually the result of alien experimentation that gave him the powers of the sun.
Yeah.
Which, whatever that means. I don't know. It's always funny
it's like
that
Superman, basically.
I mean, doesn't he have to like absorb the rays or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like Superman, where he gets more powerful,
Yeah.
he like replenishes his battery.
Yeah.
I really like the way his heat vision works because, like, in the comic book, Superman always has like these red rays, but Apollo just looks at things and then they start burning
In flames. Yeah. So Midnighter is an alternate take on Batman with powers. and not gadgets, because he doesn't fucking need them.
Yeah.
Midnighter possesses like a laundry list of abilities, including super strength, enhanced reflexes, and teleportation. But it's really cool how he teleports, because he just says door, and the door opens up, and he goes where he needs to go. So it's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, they have a ship that he's like communicating with, basically.
But the main deal with him is that he has a fight computer, like a supercomputer in his head.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. So he's able to predict the outcomes of any situation. It's like a psychic advantage over his opponents, pretty much. So I love that, because it's like Batman already kind of does that, but not to this extent.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Taskmaster. I don't know, in a way, just the predictability of like, haha, I know my opponent's moves.
Yeah, it was like taking Batman's knowledge base and then like making it just a power in his head.
Yeah.
Yep. Midnighter is not typically a bad guy or considered one.
Oh, well, your voice got really high at the end there.
But
like a lion.
He has a very gritty personality, and he doesn't have a no-kill policy at all.
They both murder the shit out of people.
Yeah. I mean, if he goes up against, so even if they're a superhero and they're doing something wrong or in his way, he's not afraid to kill them or to put them in his place.
Oh my.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the most interesting thing about them is about these two characters is their relationship. So it's not even like these characters are really cool and they resemble like Superman and Batman. It's just the dynamic and how these stories are written revolving around the relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool thing to see, especially in Steve Orlando's Midnighter run and then his later run, Midnighter and Apollo. So Midnighter was canceled after I think it was 2 trades, so it's about like 12 issues or so. Mm-hmm. And this deals with him not being with Apollo. Him and Apollo had broken up.
Is that when he meets Dick Grayson?
Yes. And there's this like really kind of weird like homoerotic scene where they're in this like bathhouse and they're both like just in a towel, but then they end up like kicking the shit out of all these guys in there, but they're all naked.
Yeah.
So it's a very much kind of like Deadpool type scene going on, but it's really funny.
Yeah.
So in Midnighter's run, there's a few things that really stick out as far as not only this being an LGBTQ person or character in comics, was the way it's written. So there's no explicit moment of, I'm gay. Like, it's just very well established. Like, he doesn't care that you don't know or do know that they're gay. It's just whatever's happening. Like, he goes on dates and stuff like that, which is really interesting. You don't really get to see that too much with LGBTQ couples. Like, he's on apps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's just like looking for a fling or like looking for a relationship. I'm not going to spoil because some of those relationship things really go along with the story. Mm-hmm. But there's a really cool moment because there's not much of like the gay bashing stuff in this, except for one scene, which I thought was really Midnighter-like.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, like, you can try to do that to Midnighter.
You don't want to say shit to Midnighter about him being gay. So they're in Russia, this person that he's currently dating in the comics, they're in Russia, and this big hulking Russian guy was like, you and your girlfriend need to get out of here. And then immediately just Midnighter smashes his face on the table.
Like,
and then
I will murder you.
He did. He just murdered them. So like, I was like, fuck yeah, gay rights. And murder. Like, yay. But yeah, so that's one of like the cool thing that happened in his solo run. So we're going to get to Midnighter and Apollo. So once Midnighter was canceled, I believe it was actually canceled, which really sucks, and I'm super upset about that. Steve Orlando was given the opportunity to finish the story, at least, which I really liked.
Yeah.
So that's where Midnighter and Apollo came out. It's only one trade. It's about 6 issues. So in the first issue, Apollo was killed by a demon.
What?
And then sent to hell right when they were getting back together, too.
That's so sad.
Yeah, super sad.
He's like a gunfighter demon. He's super cool.
Right. And then so, you know, Midnighter has to go to hell to get his lover back, which is like, oh, yay. It's like a classic romantic
Very
story.
Ophelia, ancient Greece.
Exactly. Or like Dante's Inferno or like, you know, Sandman.
Beatrice, come back.
Oh, what dreams may come.
Yes. But, however, instead of a damsel, we have Apollo. So he's like, you know, the dude in distress. And Midnighter's his knight in shining armor.
That's adorable.
Dude stress.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I think the best aspect about Midnighter is while he's a flawed character, he's definitely a positive queer character. So unlike Batman, especially in most media, Midnighter. Sorry, I thought you gasped for a second. I was like, oh, I'm talking about Batman here. Sorry. Midnighter takes no concessions about killing, which is morally wrong, but his love and willingness, and his love is limitless for Apollo. So it kind of balances out, and like he's murdering
it's
for...
It's okay, you can murder people as long as you have a loved one.
Yeah, I mean, his love for Apollo somewhat redeems him, much like Batman's love for his family. So like, even though Batman does some terrible...
What an asshole that guy is.
Exactly. And as for Apollo, I wish they would do more with him.
Me too.
But I find him... So he actually represents the oppressed aspect of the queer community, because Apollo is generally positive character despite the horrible background, which serves as a good metaphor for the sunny disposition generally taken by the LGBTQ community in the face of like the AIDS crisis, hate crimes, and the dissolution of civil rights by the government. But Apollo certainly isn't afraid to fight. So even though he's funny, he's like sunny and happy and stuff, he can be terrifying.
One of my favorite moments from Authority is where Apollo, they're fighting an analog of the Avengers, and there's this giant man character, and Apollo swoops in, and right before the giant man's like, what kind of heroes fight drunk? Because they're drunk. and Apollo flies through his head, killing him, and says, "The dangerous kind."
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's such a cool moment.
That is terrifying.
So in issue number 5 in Midnighter Apollo, I'm not going to spoil everything, but I will say, and it's a good point to point out with this relationship. So after Midnighter has this amazing, I think it's like 3 to 4 panel scene of him just fighting his way through hell, which is amazing. I mean, Midnighter, when he fights, he fucking goes hard. Like he'll go through an entire skyscraper, 80 floors, just murdering people constantly.
Oh, lovely.
But it's a really cool action. Whatever.
It's like that scene in Wanted, but instead of shooting people, he's like ripping people's faces off.
Yeah, so so by the time he finally gets there, it's actually Apollo who has to save Midnighter from dying, which I thought was really cool because it shows both. There's this equality in this relationship that
they complete each other.
Yeah. Yeah, the relationship is very not one-sided. So that's Midnighter and Apollo.
Yay. I totally have a thing for like the whole opposites attract dynamic. So that's why I'm super interested in that couple in general. Like it doesn't have to, it applies to all types of relationships, but I love the whole like yin and yang aspect.
Yeah, literally. I mean, even just aesthetically, it's like, white and gold and then just black.
Yeah. In platonic and in romantic relationships, I'm just like, I like this. When their dispositions are kind of opposite.
We need a Midnighter, an Apollo series. We really need an Apollo series.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be happy with either one because it's almost guaranteed that they're going to be together in it. So
Apollo is more my type in terms of like characters that I tend to lean towards.
He just needs development.
Yeah.
Like he needs a little bit more. I want some more Apollo, not just Midnighter. I love Midnighter, but Apollo too. Please.
I mean, I'm the opposite, but yeah. I mean, I'm only because
you've already got stuff, Noah. Stop being greedy.
But I think it's
like 6 of them.
But I think because of that, so it's like Apollo I see as a really good character, and he's definitely up there with Midnighter. He's an equal to him.
Apollo hasn't had the chance.
but he does typically take the supporting role, especially whenever Midnighter's mainly involved.
But also, as the pro murderer that you are, Midnighter's just more your type. It's okay.
Oh yeah, that's true. But I did make sure to put this in my notes though, because I thought it was really sweet. And it's one of my favorite moments with them is that in the first issue of Midnighter and Apollo, Midnighter refers to Apollo as God, which is both hilarious and really sweet at the same time.
Yeah.
He respects him so much.
Yeah, and he's like, there's this really cool scene because he's like carrying him because Midnighter's like really fucked up and like close to death, and like Midnighter's like carrying him, or Apollo's flying him out of there, and I'm just like, it's so sweet. Yeah. And then on to our last, and certainly not the only 3 LGBTQ couples in comics, but
no. And this one certainly isn't the least.
Nope.
I feel like these characters are more popular than your characters in terms of like recognition for the mainstream fans, just casual fans.
True that.
So I'm going to do Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. I know. I love them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who doesn't love them?
Right? Right? But basically, recently in the new Harley Quinn series, the creators referred to their relationship as girlfriends without the jealousy of monogamy. So they are in an open relationship, but then they are super close. They aren't in relationships themselves. In terms of the sexuality of the characters, at least with Harley, it's pretty heavily implied that she's bisexual. With Poison Ivy, it's kind of harder to get a...
Yeah. I wouldn't... Yeah. I mean, I would say bisexual, too. I would say they're both bisexual.
Yeah.
And she's, I think, a androphiliac, right? I mean, she fucks trees.
Shut up.
Oh, my God. But I feel like on the surface, a lot of the casual fans are just like, it's two hot chicks kissing. That's cool.
Yeah.
But their relationship is actually really beautiful, really complex, and it's really well explored throughout their continuity. When Harley Quinn came into comics, because obviously Poison Ivy's been around a lot longer than Harley has. And it's generally not catered to the male gaze. I kind of touch about that at the end, but it's typically just a really thoughtfully written relationship. It shows Poison Ivy at her kindest and Harley Quinn at her healthiest in terms of...
That's a really good way to put it.
Of mental spills.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, Poison Ivy's just affection for Harley kind of shows her nicer side. And again, Harley is definitely healthier and more stable when she's with Poison Ivy.
It's like she loves her just as much as her plants.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of history, I have a kind of a little bit of a timeline in terms of like their interaction and relationship development.
Heck yeah.
They met on Batman the Animated Series because that's where Harley Quinn obviously was introduced as a character. In 1993, the episode was called Harley and Ivy.
Oh,
yeah, I know. It was just
known?
about them. But Harley had left the Joker, and they team up as kind of this crime committing duo instead of crime fighting duo. The opposite of a buddy cop.
It's more like Thelma and Louise at that point.
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. The series is basically Harley Quinn is devastated by, of course, the Joker's abusive treatment of her, and Ivy spends the majority of the time together trying to convince Harley to leave him.
That guy is a total clown.
Exactly. And Ivy actually becomes quite angry when Harley continues to defend the Joker and kind of refuses to break that tie. But it kind of comes from a more protective place. Like I said, Ivy's kind of very protective of Harley Quinn in terms of like, he abuses you.
Yeah.
You need to get out of there.
Yeah.
After they're hanging out for a while and kind of form some sort of bond, Ivy gives Harley an injection that makes her immune to the toxins.
Heck yeah.
That injection typically credits her to making Harley faster and stronger too. Just kind of a more
robust.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why she's more formidable. Just being like a crazy person with a bat.
Yeah, so it's like she's typically now immune to poisons, toxins, stuff like that.
She smells like lavender.
And then faster, stronger. Which comes in handy because when the Joker finds her again, he's jealous that Harley's kind of been a really good crime committer, kind of rivaling his own gang. So when he meets up with her, tries to poison her with the flower that he wears, and it doesn't work because Ivy has made her immune.
Fuck yeah, Ivy.
Yeah.
I knew the flower was going to come in somewhere.
Yeah. The poison flower Joker always has. Obviously Harley ends up going with the Joker. It's kind of one of those relationships that they can't tend to break. The comic debut of them together was in Batman Adventures number 12. It wasn't really a mainstream continuity, so it doesn't really count as like their Harley's official introduction into the universe, but that's kind of like their first interaction. Harley's official debut was in 1999. It was in a comic called Batman Harley Quinn.
Oh, fitting.
Yeah, which was set during the No Man's Land kind of saga.
A lot of good characters came from that entire big event.
Yeah, exactly. So this took place smack dab in the middle of No Man's Land. Ivy was kind of on the periphery of this, trying to stay out of it, and for the most part. But their meeting starts when Poison Ivy saves Harley Quinn when the Joker tries to kill her. Again, yeah. So again, it's just Poison Ivy going like, "Get away from him! Stop it!
He's no good for you."
Girl, I don't think he's good.
But it was obviously the relationship was really taken well in the animated series, so they're kind of an accepted team up from this point on. When Poison Ivy saves her in No Man's Land, it's kind of just like, okay, and they're a group or a couple, regardless of whether or not it's romantic or not, that are going to keep coming together. Like people, the writers and creators in DC really liked working them together.
Gotham City Sirens.
Exactly. Get into that.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Batman, Harley, and Ivy, and the Gotham City Sirens were more issues that kind of explored the relationship going forward. However, the sad thing about Gotham City Sirens is that it ends with Harley Quinn breaking into Arkham Asylum to murder the Joker. Obviously, he still has a very strong grasp on her, and instead of killing him, she frees him. Ivy's there trying to stop her, and Harley, knowing that Ivy cares about her so much, she kind of reveals Ivy's feelings for her. So she cruelly is like, I know that you're in love with me, and Ivy is kind of shocked because it kind of had been this unspoken thing. So Ivy's stunned, and then Harley leaves.
Just drops that bombshell, and then she's like, bye.
Yeah, she attacks Ivy to get away with the Joker while Ivy is stunned, and she escaped, and it was kind of obviously a really tragic thing.
That's so sad.
I know, because it's one of the only people that Ivy really cares about is using her feelings against her. So Harley leaves. They're kind of
stupid, abusive prick.
Exactly. So their relationship is a little bit tense from this point on for a while, but in this time period in comics, it's a lot. This is where the speculation comes in, because it's okay, Harley dropped the L word. She kind of outed Poison Ivy.
Oh, love.
And yeah, exactly. That's where I was going with this. And so between the Gotham City Sirens run and it's not until 2015 that it's officially that they are girlfriends. They eventually got together.
It's a brand spanking new relationship. 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. That it took so long for them to be like, yes, they're girlfriends.
And they still have a hard time to say it.
I know. I was going to say most of the time they toe the line in current continuity, but most of the time they are a very happy, stable couple. Again, I really feel that they bring out the best in each other.
Are they girlfriends? Fine. Yeah.
They are. So we've had scenes, obviously, where they're just very open and hurting and comforting each other with various things, saving each other. They have they rescue each other all the time, which is super cute. We've also had more risque things like shower scenes where they're washing each other's backs, and panels they thought on-screen kisses. I know I mentioned that in the history one. They even gotten married. It's not in the main continuity, but it's in the Injustice 2 comics that they've gotten married on the page. So.
Yeah. And that's always funny too, because a lot of people will say their wives because of that, and because it did happen, and it's always a weird thing, because it's in one
universe
thing they're married, and this one they're girlfriends, but then you're also saying they're best friends.
It turns out that Poison Ivy, it's the Injustice world is her perfect fantasy.
Yeah.
They get married, and Superman has punched a hole in the Joker's chest.
Exactly. That's true. I didn't think about it.
Oh, when you put it that way.
Ivy is this is obviously the superior world. This is the good place.
Ted Danson's there.
They got married in Vegas too, which I thought was super funny.
It's very Harley-like.
Yeah. But so in general, they do suffer a lot from being over-sexualized, especially in the way that they're drawn. I feel in terms of the writing, it tends to be pretty thoughtful. But obviously, female characters in general sometimes are over-sexualized in comics, just in the way that they're drawn and what they choose to show.
It's back to the male gaze issue.
Exactly.
We should start poking men's eyes out. No, I'm just kidding.
If they can't see. Obviously, though, it's a symptom of a lack of female writers in general, a lack of bisexual women.
It is. I like that they started. So Ivy had this kind of new costume in the New 52 and Rebirth a little bit, where she would have the normal green, her outfit normally would be a unitard or whatever, and it was kind of revealing. But instead of where there wasn't a costume, they just added black.
Yeah.
So she had this full suit or whatever, and I thought
think
that
she looks badass.
She looks amazing like that.
Yeah.
And I like how their first kiss, it wasn't over-sexualized.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of more awkward looking or whatever, at least with Ivy's part. She's okay.
Yeah. I feel despite all of the setbacks in terms of over-sexualization that sometimes occurs, it's probably one of the sweetest, most interesting relationships in terms of same-sex same-sex couples in comics, because they really are just there for each other. Their relationship itself is super interesting, and it's fun watching it evolve. So I know they got married in Injustice 2 comics, so maybe in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of that classic, like the two get together, the clown assistant and the plant wine together, and a tale as old as time. Took the words right out of my mouth.
You're stupid. Yeah, they're real. I like them a lot. I think in the conception of it, it's a weird pairing. But then when you actually like look at their history and like how you laid it out, because I knew all that stuff, but actually like seeing kind of the roadmap to them becoming a couple makes a shit ton of sense.
I kind of always just picture their history of like Poison Ivy taking Harley's hand and like trying to get her away from this really toxic, abusive relationship.
And into a loving one.
Yeah, exactly.
and given that it's Poison Ivy taken into a healthy toxic relationship, just literally
in which
toxic.
Harley is immune
Yes.
to these toxins.
Perfect.
I and this is serious. I love it when they take a kind of like trope and then make it more not just healthy, realistic and meaningful. So I think in this sort of like lesbian relationship, not that they're both completely gay, but like in this sort of lesbian relationship where you have Ivy representing kind of like the man-hating, she hates literally mankind.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then the lesbian who had straight relationships before was abused and then starts having exclusive female
So it's like on
relationships.
paper, this could have gone wrong.
Exactly. And I love that they've taken this like kind of, not even, it's not a stereotype because it's not a negative thing, but this kind of classic lesbian relationship and fleshed out and made it much more like well written and also adventurous and cool.
Yeah, yeah.
They both kick ass.
Yeah.
To be, I don't want to be like political or whatever, but
you.
there's, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But there's this whole stigma and there's this thing that a lot of the bigots and people that don't like the LGBTQ community say is that lesbians have the highest rate of domestic violence in their relationships. And this, I believe, I don't know if the writers were doing this on purpose, but it's literally her taking her out of an abusive relationship and into a good one.
Yeah.
So I've always been like, fuck you guys. Look at this.
That's probably, hopefully, what the writers were thinking, too.
Yeah.
It's an awful stereotype. And this is, I'm saying this as a guy who was beaten out by 4 lesbians.
Yeah. All right. Before recommendations, we have a special thanks to our new Patreon subscriber, Natalie. Okay. So I don't know how to say your last name.
It hasn't come up.
No, that's true. I don't know if it's Toner or Tonner.
But thank you all the same.
But thank you, and I'm sorry I murdered your last name.
If your last name is Toner, thank you. If it's Tonner, better luck next time.
All right.
So as we do,
Superpower time.
yes, give you superpower, maybe a backstory, definitely a superhero name or whatever. So what should she get?
All right. Well, I think, Jared, we were talking about how good at listening she is, right?
It's a very good
Obviously. But
she listens to this podcast.
see, that was implied.
Perfect.
Noah, Jesus.
Sorry.
Anyway, I thought it would be funny if she could hear the subtext of what people are actually saying. Instead of their actual words, she knows what they're actually saying.
That's interesting.
It's both a blessing and a curse.
That's her tagline.
Yeah, so the situation would be like, "Oh, you look great," and it's like, "You bitch," because she knew.
Or the person's really just thinking about like some casserole that they want to eat when they get home or something like that. But name. So I think since her last name is Toner or Tonner, whatever her last name is, it starts with T-O-N. Undertone would be a good one. Or Undertoner.
Yes.
Undertone is cool.
Yeah. I think that's good.
So that one, to complete it, it's Undertone. You're also part of a race of freakish monsters that live under the ground, but you're like a pretty one.
Shut up. So thank you, Natalie, for supporting this podcast. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yes. So comic book recommendation time.
Recommendation.
I don't say it like that.
You've been doing weird things with your voice all episode.
So all episode?
Yep.
Okay, I'll just say my recommendation now. So Steve Orlando, Midnighter. It's very easy to find. There's 2 trades, and then there's one Midnighter and Apollo. Definitely pick them up. They're quick reads, but they're really good reads. Artwork's fantastic. The first trade, I believe, is called Out. That's all it's called. The second one's called Hard. And then Midnighter and Apollo. So get those.
Nice.
Next.
I'm going to recommend Shatterstar, which was a series that just got put into trade this year. And it's super cool. And it's by Tim Seeley and Carlos Villa. I don't know how they pronounce it. But if you grew up in Georgia, it's Villa. Anyway, it's a real fun series. And it's Shatterstar's latest, what do you call it?
Comic
adventures. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's really good because they don't shy away from any queeritude. But it doesn't dominate the series either. It's feels very healthy 2019.
Like it's not front and center that he's gay. Not every panel's about him being gay. Oh, funny how that works.
There's some gay smooches. In it. Yeah. Page 47. But super good, very fun, very adventurous. Cool stuff. Check out.
All right. Yeah. So my recommendation is going to be Gotham City Sirens Volume 4, which is the last one. It's called Division. Obviously, if you're going to read Volume 4, you should probably read the other 3. It's a really good series anyway.
It's really good.
Yeah. But the final volume for Division is very Shakespearean. It actually has the scene that I was talking about with Harley kind of using Ivy's love against her and escaping with the Joker. But I mean, it has a lot of drama going on. Catwoman kind of betrays Ivy and Harley, and then Ivy, when she was like, I don't want you to be hurt, Harley, so I'm not going to kill you, but you have to help me kill Catwoman, which these women have been like almost friends, all of the other trades. So it's just very dramatic. It's very cool. And then, like I said, it has a little splash of feels at the end there. So
heck yeah. Well, that's it. It's our LGBTQ character couples in comics.
Yay. Thanks, guys.
How dare you?
I'm just slowly taking over everything.
Yeah, that's just Kayla saying thanks, guys. I like it. I'm gonna have to steal hers.
I'm glad they couldn't hear anything you just said.
Oh, well, I didn't think they were supposed to.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.